Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you join us live, super happy to have you. If you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I'll do my best to kind of keep an eye on it, see if we can kind of get a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really, really helps with the engagement and the algorithm, people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, if you've stumbled upon Cinema Mancuso, why not subscribe? We're trying to grow this community as best as I can. So maybe one day I can quit my real job and devote all my time to this. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes down in the description so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and same deal as before. Please like this live stream and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was $172 million, which was a whopping 133% jump. So huge jump. If you've been following the channel, following the show, you've heard me say a million times that January and parts of February are really the dead zone of the box office year. August and September are also kind of part of that group, but at least those are usually, particularly August, those are usually still carrying over some box office from the huge summer movies. And, there are still huge movies in November and December, and we're still seeing them here. They're not going to be as huge, right? But it's usually around this middle part of February that, at least in recent box office history, this is when you start to have some bigger releases. And opening at number one, we have Captain America: Brave New World, the newest MCU installment that is very mid from what I hear. I was going to go see it. I just don't have the time to go see everything anymore, at least as of right now. My life's kind of in like a little bit of a chaotic period. And I was just like, I just don't have the time to go see a mid movie. But at least it, beat the bottom projections, right? So this was projected to make around 80 to 105 million. I put it around a 92 million target. It ended up making a little less than 88 million. So, at least it made that a bottom threshold. But again, this is still, pretty low, but not awful. If you look at Deadpool and Wolverine, which of course is a very different kind of movie in a different set of circumstances, it being, a Deadpool movie, which is its own, has its own built-in audience and box office prospects. On top of it also being the return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, kind of being a send-off to all the Marvel Fox, all the Marvel stuff that Fox worked on over the past couple decades. That opened around 200 something million, I believe, right? So this is less than half of that. And again, that makes sense, but I think Disney was hoping that Deadpool Wolverine would be the rule, not the exception. We still have Fantastic Four later this year, but also something like Thunderbolts, which is coming out sooner, like in May. The jury's still out if Deadpool was the exception or the rule, right? And it's made about 100. Interestingly, it made more. Actually, not interestingly. This actually makes a lot of sense. This made an additional around 100 million internationally. So worldwide, it's made about 180 million. And it was made for about 180 million. So, worldwide, it right now has a $200,000 profit. So, it at least has crossed that initial threshold, which I was happy to see, right? Not happy that I'm in the sense that I'm really rooting for this film one way or the other, but just happy that if I were them, I would at least go, phew, all right, that's at least one thing. Because there's plenty of films that, open and they're in the red. So while you still want to at least double the budget to really truly break evens, because of course the budget isn't counting for marketing and advertising. Ideally, you want to double the budget, but at least in the opening, you want to at least clear the budget, right? At least just purely off of that number. I'm expecting a pretty precipitous drop, especially considering, again, the reviews have not been great. It's not like critics hate it, but audiences love it. It doesn't really seem like audiences care for it all that much. I think the issue is not superhero fatigue. I think audiences are just tired of same old, right? And again, that's why Deadpool did so well is because it was, in a lot of ways it was same old, but on a superficial level it was, it had something new to offer to audiences, or at least something semi-novel. Also opening this week, we also have Paddington in Peru, the third Paddington film, and fittingly it opened at third place, bringing in around $13 million, which unfortunately fell below the projections of around 15 to 23. I had put around 18, so that is definitely a little disappointing. I think this has already been in theaters, though, internationally, because worldwide it's made almost $130 million. So unless it just had a gangbusters weekend, which is very possible, my understanding is that I think this has already maybe been playing in some other markets. And it was only made for about $75 million. So despite this rather small opening, this has also not been in the red. And at least it's on its way. And what I'm doing right now, I'm trying to multitask here. I'm going to just double check and see what the first two Paddington films opened at. So the first Paddington opened domestically at around 19 million. And then Paddington 2 opened around 11 million. Okay, so this is pretty standard. And this kind of makes sense because I feel like there wasn't a lot of marketing for it. I think they really don't try to market these super aggressively. I think they maybe put more of their money into international. Because, I never knew about Paddington as a kid, but I guess Paddington is like Winnie the Pooh and like Curious George, but for like British audiences. And I'm sure it's not like they don't have Curious George or Winnie the Pooh, but I don't think I had any recollection or exposure, or understanding, or familiarity with Paddington until I was in high school. And I heard about this movie, the first one coming out, going, oh, that's interesting. Anyway, and I moved on with my life. But, clearly it's been doing pretty well overseas. Also opening, or at least making its domestic debut, is a Chinese animated film called I'm presuming it's Ni Jia. It might be Za. A Ni Jia 2. Opening at 7.3 million, opening at number 5, which is interesting. This thing's already been making a shit ton of money. So if you look here, worldwide, it's made over $1 billion off of, again, this is of course, converted to US dollars. So it's made over $1 billion. It was made for about $80 million. So this is like an over, 1,200% return, as you can see over on that far right column. So again, I know nothing about Ni Jia or its sequel, but clearly it is enough of a powerhouse internationally, specifically in China, that it's, anything it's doing in the United States is just icing on the cake. And the fact that it made it into the top 10, like, I didn't see any marketing about this. I don't even know what this is. I looked, when I say I don't know anything, I looked a little bit into it before. It's like an animated action adventure film, I think. The fact it's squeaking into the top 10, not only squeaking, but making it into the top 5, speaks to, I guess, the success of this film. But again, also just like the state of the box office in this part of the year, right? Continuing into their second weeks, we have Heart Eyes holding its second place spot, bringing in just a little over 13 million, actually having a jump, which is interesting. And actually, I'm going to do some real-time fact checking, because this was already wide. It's not like it, because if you look here, while I have a site pulling up, if you look at number 10, we have Becoming Led Zeppelin, which is a documentary about the titular band, Led Zeppelin, bringing it a little under $3 million. It had an 11% jump, but that's because it opened wide. Like, it was originally limited release in only like 300 theaters, and this week it was like over 1,000. I'm wondering if Hard Eyes had a similar situation, because I'm like, why did it have a 57% jump? Other than, I guess, because it's like labeled as a Valentine's movie, and it opened the week before Valentine's Day. So, no, it had the same amount of theaters. Yeah, I'm gonna attribute this to the fact that it was Valentine's Day weekend, and it was clearly released at this part of the year, to capitalize on that theming, right? So a 57% jump, which is cool to see. So far, its domestic total is around 21 million, with a worldwide total of closer to 22 million. So most of it, this is like over 90%, is being brought in by the at least domestic markets, on a budget of 18 million. So it's crossed that initial threshold. Still has a long way to go. Also, still in the continuing now into its second week, we have Love Hurts dropping from 4th to 6th place in its second week, bringing in 6.3 million, 9% jump, right? So also kind of benefiting from the Valentine's Day branding and theming. Hard Eyes got fine reviews, but Love Hurts has been kind of getting negative-ish reviews, and it also had a worse opening, I remember, from last week. So it is still in the red, if you see on that far right column. Worldwide, it's only brought in a little over 13 million, again, off of a $18 million budget. So, sorry, Kiwi Kwan and Ariana DeBose. It looks like Love Hurts, as well as box office performance also hurts. Looking here, still in the top 5, we have Dogman, right, dropping from 1st to 4th place in its third week now, bringing in about 12.5 million. It was about a 30% drop. And this has been doing meh, right? Like, so in its third week, it's if you look at the legs are still below 2, which is not great, but also not ridiculous for a third week performance. But also not like, we shouldn't settle for that. Like, we've seen, I mean, if you look at Hard Eyes and Love Hurts, which are in their second week, they've had better performance and longevity just in 2 weeks. Dogman bringing in about 84.5 million off a $40 million budget. So, all of that to say, though, then it's profitable, right? It is in the green, and I think it will continue to make money because there's not really much competition to a film like Dogman, so I think it'll keep making money. It's just a matter of how much per week, how much can be squeezed out of it, right? Speaking of movies getting squeezed for every last drop of value, Mufasa the Lion King, dropping out of top 5, finally, 5th to 7th, in its 9th week, though. In its 9th week, bringing in about 5.5 million, a 1% drop. This is insane. Why and how is this movie doing so well? And again, doing so well is relative, right? Because if you look at the percent return, it's not gangbusters. It's made about $686 million off of a $200 million budget. So only like a little less than 250% return, which is not insane. It is not that impressive, especially when you compare it to its predecessor, the live action Lion King from 2019. But it's that longevity, right? So if you look at the legs column, again, legs for the uninitiated, this is basically a number that we derive by taking the total domestic box office, in this case it's around 240 million, and dividing it by the film's biggest domestic weekend. Typically that's the opening weekend, but for example, like this, for Hard Eyes and Love Hurts, this weekend is going to most likely be its biggest weekend. Films like that started limited releases, then went wide. That they're once they go wide, that'd be their biggest weekend. And so theoretically, the result of that equation, the bigger the number means the more money you're making as a whole. It's not all front loaded in this like one big weekend. 6.54. That is insane. It's one of the highest that I've ever seen doing this show, since I've been calculating this figure. And again, it's just been making money week after week after week, to the point, again, it only is now dropping out of the top 5. Opened right before Christmas, kind of had a weaker start, and then kind of improved. I don't know if it had a jump, but it jumped at least its spot in the top 10. I think it only opened, I forget where it opened, but it ended up then somehow making it to the top, to number 1, and holding that for a really, really long time. I think it was until Dogman came out a couple weeks ago. So, it got middling reviews, but again, like I've said, perhaps the meme, the what did you say about my bra, that it works. It somehow gets people into the theater, and it helps, again, squeeze every last drop. Another film also worth mentioning here is One of Them Days. Not in theaters for as long, but it is now in its fifth week, dropping from 6th to 8th place, bringing in 4.3 million, only a 12% drop, which is pretty good. And look at the Lex, 3.69. It's in the green. It's it's only been domestic as well. It's only been playing in domestic markets, and it's brought in about $43.5 million domestically and worldwide, off of a $14 million budget. So again, you have these smaller. If you can have these smaller movies, because I look at something like Mufasa, instead of making a $200 million movie, what if you made 10, $20 million movies? So you spread out the risk, and theoretically, if they can all have a similar ROI, then there's more diversity of content at the box office. And you're just giving filmmakers, more opportunities, right? So it's exciting to see One of Them Days. This is another one of those films that I was gonna go see. I had tickets like on 4 different times and had to cancel for different reasons. But I've heard it's really good, and I've seen little clips, and I love Keke Palmer. And SZA seems really funny in it as well. So I'm really glad to see that this is still kind of sticking out, and didn't kind of just like fall by the wayside in the box office landscape. And looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have The Monkey, Osgood Perkins' follow-up to his kind of sleeper hit Longlegs from, I think it was last year, right? That speaking of ROI, that had an incredible ROI. Not just in terms of money, but just kind of held out for a long time. So the reviews are out on this one. It seems good, but Longlegs didn't get like amazing reviews by any estimation. And that ended up doing really well. So, this is not projected to open super big, but I'm actually going to look up quickly here and confirm what Longlegs opened at. So Longlegs opened around 22 million. So this would put it right in this kind of same frame here. So it's projected to make around 17 to 24 million. I'm going to put it around 20.3. I'm going to start adding decimal places to try to make it as specific as I can. So it can sting even more when I'm wrong. And then we also have The Unbreakable Boy. This is seems like a very generic, family drama about, I guess it's based on a true story. It's, about, this little boy here named Austin who is on the autism spectrum and is also battling brittle bone disease. And his father, Scott, is played by Zachary Levi, who is not necessarily super popular right now. It's been a little controversial, so that might be hurting the film. And appropriately, it's only projected to make around 3 to 8 million. I'm going to put it around 5.7 million. So again, not a very, very big opening. Captain America is really going to be like one of the big openings for a while. Okay, before moving on, just want to give a quick plug. I have another YouTube channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment, in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, take a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these cartoon versions of myself. It was a lot of fun to work on. I worked on it for a really long time, so I'd really appreciate if you could go check it out. Leave comments, let me know how you disagree with everything I said. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 1. So Disney is rolling back its DEI efforts, as many companies are doing as of late. This was communicated to employees in a memo from the Chief Human Resources Officer, Sonia Coleman. And they're doing this supposedly so the company can, quote, focus more closely on business outcomes, end quote. Which is a very vague way of just saying, we think this is going to hurt the business, so we're going to stop doing it. Additionally, references to their Reimagine Tomorrow initiative, which was like a DEI initiative at the company, References to this initiative were scrubbed from their filing to regulators. This is a program launched in 2021, again, as a means to enable and uplift. It's always like these really vague corporate-y words. So I'm curious how effective it even was, but it was designed to uplift underrepresented communities. This filing with regulators also did not mention other programs and fellowships that had been established for underrepresented talent. And another, reflection of this rolling back of these DEI efforts, and the one that people will be more aware of, is going to be the removal of like the content warnings on Disney Plus for programs. So if you think about something like Peter Pan, which has some a little outdated and insensitive depictions of Native Americans or indigenous peoples. Prior to this, if you pulled up the movie, there'd be like a 10-second text card that would come up, basically as like a mea culpa. Like, this was made, it wasn't right, it's offensive, it's insensitive, we're not going to change the movie, we're going to show it to you as it was made. Keep this in mind, and warning viewers that might have quote unquote outdated cultural depictions of, these marginalized groups. This will still be on Disney Plus like the app, but it's not going to be played in front of the movies anymore. So this is going to be moved to an info tab. So when you go to the film and you can select info or related or suggested, you can go over to warning, I suppose, or maybe it'll be even under the info. So let's take a step back. So I feel like this word, we use this DEI as like this buzzword. Like first, in the 90s, it was PC, like politically correct, and it was liberal, then it was woke, and then DEI. Like basically the right will just cling on to these like words and demonize them and make them into pejorative, derogatory terms. So I think it bears taking a moment here to kind of take a step back and actually just like make sure we're all understanding, like, what is DEI? So it's an acronym, right? It stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the idea is that it's basically encompasses organizational frameworks. So again, frameworks for businesses that seek to promote fair treatment for groups that had been previously ignored or actively discriminated against, right? So this is not a new thing. And that's what really burns my biscuits, is that people are trying to make this out like, oh, woke has gone too far. Well, if woke has gone too far, woke went too far 30, 40 years ago. Because this kind of began slowly, to be fair. It wasn't as widespread as it is now, but this began in like the 70s and 80s and in the 90s. It really blew up in the 2020s, though, right? Of course, with the death, or should I say the murder of George Floyd, right? And you have all these companies posting the black squares, and you have all these companies saying, we are going to commit to diversity in our companies and in our workforce, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm being dismissive not because I'm against DEI. I'm being dismissive because these companies, as we're seeing now, they didn't really mean it, and they didn't really give a shit. But DEI has a lot of benefits, right? And some of them are not obvious, some that you wouldn't necessarily think, right? The obvious ones, depending on how you feel about DEI, is that it's a moral imperative. Like, it doesn't really matter what you gain from it, is that it's just something you should do anyway, right? That people from marginalized communities, like women, like people of color, again, like I said, were either kind of ignored or blocked out of the system, or sometimes actively discriminated against. So I think it's valuable to make concerted efforts to try to, because you can't just say we're not going to be racist anymore, or we're not going to be sexist. Like, the damage has already been done, and this is generationally, cyclically a problem. So sometimes you have to kind of put your thumb on the scale a little bit to try to kind of right these wrongs, right? But put that aside, right? If you don't care about the moral imperative of it all, having a more diverse workforce, whether it be like the boots on the ground people or in the executive kind of sphere, it's going to make your organization more successful. If for nothing else, just having different voices and perspectives is just really valuable for any organization. And definitionally, people from different backgrounds are going to have different perspectives. So it's just going to strengthen your business because there's more Not to say that there's more cooks in the kitchen. There's still the same amount of cooks, but instead of all the cooks having the same exact way of going about things, you have people with, fresh takes on things. Especially if your product serves a certain community and the C-suite doesn't reflect that community. So if your main community are black women, it might be useful to have a black woman in your C-suite, right? So it will help the business in that way. But then it'll also help the business theoretically because it's good PR. And that's why you saw all these businesses. And when I say businesses, we're really talking about these mega national and transnational corporations. This is why you saw them all very publicly adopt these DEI programs following George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests of the summer of 2020, because they thought it'd be good business, right? And that's the thing, is that my issue with DEI is not the theoretical, the idea of it. If anything, I'm for it. The issue is that it didn't go far enough. Or rather, it wasn't really implemented in any earnest or sincere way, right? So, these companies make these big announcements. We're gonna implement these DEI programs and initiatives, and we're gonna solve racism by blah 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 blah. What they really did, and I'm painting with broad strokes. Every company is different and did different things, but in a broad sense, what these companies did were hire elite consultants to be like the chief diversity officer. And it was all a lot of talk and no walk. It was very little progress has been made. If you look at these studies, these companies that adopted these DEI efforts are really no more diverse in a statistically meaningful way. Again, it was really more about signaling this kind of wishy-washy sense of belonging rather than material concessions, right? Because again, they're only doing this because they think it'll help the bottom line. If it's not going to help the bottom line, or at worst, or even worse, hurt the bottom line, they're going to drop it like a bad habit. And Disney is not an isolated incident in this regard. That it's part of a larger backlash, again, to quote-unquote wokeism. Trump's re-election, his return to the White House, seemed to suggest, and I've been very vocal, I don't think it actually suggests this, but at least the perception is that Trump won the White House again because people were fed up with woke and DEI and stuff like this. And that Americans were shifting back towards more conservative social values. It feels like we're regressing, right? He recently issued executive orders to investigate quote-unquote illegal DEI programs that, theoretically violate federal civil rights laws. So this idea that, you can't implement any of these DEI programs because then you would be discriminating against white people, or if it's about gender, discriminating against men. And that would be illegal under the law. The law does not say you can't discriminate against black people. You can't discriminate against anybody. So that's the argument. The Hollywood Reporter notes that Disney did consider the fact that quotas could be considered discriminatory. Common sense wise, this isn't a case of reverse racism. That it's an initiative to try to add more to the system. It's like when you're playing Monopoly. You can't start Monopoly and just start playing. You have to be given a bunch of money that you did nothing to earn, theoretically, right? Otherwise, you can't do anything. So it's like a similar situation where, again, you have to maybe kind of put your thumbs on the scale to kind of jumpstart this generational transformation that you want to see happen in society, right? But that's what Disney's afraid of. That they're afraid of, even if it's not technically legal, they don't want to have the fight with Trump and with a conservative government. And again, Disney's not alone. You see companies across every industry pulling back their DEI efforts, and some of them have even gone as far to use that as a convenient excuse for poor performance. Or if not the companies themselves, then other people, conservative commentators being like, wow, this company's not doing well, go woke, go broke. This is what, and usually just because of a bad economy, bad business practices, or all of the above plus more, right? But again, DEI becomes a very convenient scapegoat. And again, these companies adopted these policies in the first place from a cynical point of view, of a self-interested point of view. And they will drop them the minute they are no longer advantageous. And we've seen this with Disney specifically, right? I've done stories on this channel about how Disney has internally been cracking down on anything considered like too progressive or too woke, including like Inside Out 2, then making a conscious effort to, make Riley seem less gay. Trying to tone down certain elements of that sequel that seem to imply that she might be interested in her female friends, her female, fellow hockey players, as well as the Pixar Disney Plus series Win or Lose, which was going to feature or at least emphasize a trans character. That whole subplot has been removed, which is just really disappointing. Because again, these communities, especially when you look at like the gay community, or I guess you call it the queer at large, the queer community, loves Disney. They are one of the most vocal supporters of Disney. And it really is a slap in the face. And it's not just these like kind of behind the scenes things. Like Bob Iger, when he returned to being CEO, he responded to the financial failure of the Marvels, which was a female-led superhero film with a, Brie Larson's wife, but then you have a black female lead as well as, I always forget their names, but the girl who plays Miss Marvel from the show, the Pakistani girl, right? So a diverse, all women-led film. Of course, the film doesn't do well, not because it's woke, but because it's just same old, and no one gives a shit. But of course, it becomes a convenient scapegoat to say, oh, it's because it was diverse. So Bob Iger said in response to the box office failure of this, saying, quote, creators lost sight of what their number one objective needed to be. We have to entertain first. It's not about messages, end quote. Which is offensive that he said that. And the reason why that's offensive to me, it offends me, because this is implying that the Marvels or any of these other movies have really strong political messages. Most of their films or their projects have the same anodyne messaging, just with a diverse cast, right? It's not like they're having this radical thematic ideas being presented. It's the same bottom of the barrel, least common denominator, status quo political worldview, but with a black cast or with a female cast. So are you saying just the existence of marginalized people is a message, and that message is not worth pushing? I know that's not what he's trying to say, but that's the implication, right? I have a quote here from the company's 2024 annual report saying, quote, our businesses create entertainment, travel, and consumer products, the success of which depends substantially on consumer tastes and preferences that change in often unpredictable ways. Preferences of some consumers are affected by their perceptions of our position on matters of public interest, including regarding environmental and social issues, end quote. So they're very explicit. Like, we know people's opinions will be affected based off of, like, any quote-unquote stances we take. And again, this is offensive to me because, like, what, the stance of showing diverse, like, different groups of people exist? Like, I don't understand what the message is. What is the social issue? What social issue was the Marvels pushing? That women exist? I just don't understand. Please, if someone wants to give me a good faith, sincere answer to this question, I'm more than happy to hear. But I think it's just anytime there's a group of people put in a media project, whether it's a movie or a show or a video games especially, and it's not just like straight white men or like the good minority, so it's like a woman but she's like a badass, like, if it's not the standard, people go, oh, you're forcing politics into it. Why isn't it forcing politics if it's just a straight white man? Why is it only political when it's a woman or a black person or a queer person? And the Disney staff members at Disney are not happy about this. So there's a backlash. Deadline spoke to an anonymous Disney insider who said, quote, it's like Chapek on steroids. And for context, Bob Chapek was the interim CEO or the intermediate CEO between Bob Iger and Bob Iger. After he left, Bob Chapek was his successor. And his tenure as CEO kind of fell flat on its face for several reasons. But one of them was when Florida passed or was going to pass this Don't Say Gay bill in schools. where you couldn't talk about gay people existing in like public schools at a certain grade level. Disney obviously has a huge presence in Florida, so the staff was like, aren't you going to speak out or say anything? And Bob Chapek didn't really want to dip his toes in the problem, but then he eventually did, but it was so tepid that it didn't please the people who were mad that they hadn't said anything, but it was still enough to piss off conservatives, and they were mad that Disney said anything at all, so Disney became this, like, focus of the culture war for a little bit, and a lot of people were like, oh, Bob would have stuck up for us. Because it was during his tenure that Disney did become more diverse, again, when it came to gender and race and sexuality and gender expression and things like that. So, again, this person said, quote, it's like Chapek on steroids. What's next? Where do we go from here? What do we stand for now? Keeping MAGA happy? This is not what I expected from Bob. I thought he had our back, end quote. So presumably this insider is maybe part of the queer community, or what part of one of these communities. Again, very different than Iger's first tenure as CEO, where he came in and really took huge risks. They made really big, broad swings, creative swings, acquisitions, buying Pixar and Marvel and Lucasfilm. And this time around, he's much more conservative, both, when it comes to political issues, but frankly, just as a business. He's just not taking any risk. Whatever's gonna increase the share price, that's his goal. Because at this point, in his mind, he's already cemented his legacy. He's just back now to make as much money as possible, which is going to be directly tied to the share price. So, again, Disney's not unique in this, but it's like A2 Disney of, everyone's doing it, but you too, you champion of these communities, of meaning so much to so many people, is just really disappointing to see. And I'm disappointed, and I'm a straight white man, right? Like, so it's, even just from my, third party perspective, this is disappointing. I can't imagine how people feel who feel like Disney has abandoned them. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, give me 1 second here. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So Donald Trump has been named chairman of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts by its board. And you might be wondering, how did Donald Trump get nominated as the chairman, or named as the chairman of the Kennedy Center? Well, because the board is filled with Trump allies. He fired, they basically uninstalled a bunch of board members, and he installed, he filled those seats with a bunch of political devotees. So the board fired the current, I guess now no longer the current, the president, Deborah Rutter, who had been in the role since 2014. And she had this to say on her way out, saying, quote, I depart my position proud of all we accomplished to meet that ambition. Much like our democracy itself, artistic expression must be nurtured, fostered, prioritized, and protected. It is not a passive endeavor. Indeed, there is no clearer sign of American democracy at work than our artists, the work they produce, and audiences' unalienable right to actively participate, end quote. They were seen as too liberal or too woke, so they were all pushed out, and Trump has now been named the chairman, which, from my understanding, a sitting president has never been the chairman of the Kennedy Center. Trump had this to say, quote, it is a great honor to be chairman of the Kennedy Center, especially with this amazing board of trustees. We will make the Kennedy Center a very special and exciting place, end quote. But of course, Trump has other shit to do. So as of right now, Richard Grenell has been appointed the interim executive director. He was the ambassador to Germany in Trump's first term in office. And speaking about Rick's role here, Trump said, quote, no more drag shows or other anti-American propaganda. Only the best. Rick, welcome to show business, end quote. So I guess there was like a drag show recently at the Kennedy Center, which, again, so you're saying gay people are anti-American? Drag is I'm not quite sure what I do know what the implication is, but it's, like, I would rather, usually they do just say the quiet part out loud. Like, I'd rather they just said the awful thing instead of saying a less awful but unclear thing. So I guess that's the issue here, that the Kennedy Center is too woke. So what's the history of the Kennedy Center? So this is it's a national cultural center. It opened in 1971, of course, named after the slain John F. Kennedy. And and it celebrates performance arts. So performing arts, the theater, dance, music, things of that realm. It's the official residence of the National Symphony Orchestra and the Washington National Opera. It's a public-private partnership funded mostly by ticket sales and private donations. It does have some federal funding that's earmarked for its maintenance and operation, but it's notably not really funded by the government in the way that the post office is or something like that, right? And it's widely considered, or until now, widely considered nonpartisan, right? The LA Times notes that Trump doesn't really have a fondness for the Kennedy Center. He skipped the Kennedy Center honors, which they do every year. They pick important artists in American culture and honor them and have like a retrospective about them, whatever. He skipped the honors in his first term when some honorees threatened to boycott the ceremony over Trump's statements regarding Charlottesville, right? That there's good people. There were fine people on both sides, right, of a white supremacist rally. Trump recently threatened to fire board members who did not share his vision for a, quote, golden age in arts and culture, end quote. And now he has followed through on, I guess, that threat, right? And this came as a surprise to everybody, most of all the Kennedy Center. They seemed to be taken aback by the move. So an official statement put out was, quote, per the center's governance established by Congress in 1958, the chair of the board of trustees is appointed by the center's board members. There was nothing in the center statute that would prevent a new administration from replacing board members. However, this would be the first time such action has been taken with the Kennedy Center's board, end quote. So, they're pointing out that it's rare for a sitting president to basically come in and remove and replace a whole swath of board members. And I didn't write down every new board member that he's installed. But one of the people would be like Susie Wiles, right? Who was his campaign manager. She's now like his chief of staff, I believe. Or if not, she's like really important in his current White House administration, right? What does she know about the arts, right? Like, so it's being filled with people that exist to be his political subservience, right? Which is not what it's supposed to be. And the arts community has not been taking this well. So his installation as chairman has inspired mass resignations and resistance and other actions, right? So this includes from TV producer Shonda Rhimes, of course, the brain behind Grey's Anatomy and other shows, I think like Scandal, right? Again, amongst many, she's been very prolific. I think Bridgerton is like the more recent one. She was appointed to the board by Obama. And she served as the center's treasurer before now stepping down. And she shared a quote with her announcement, a quote from JFK, saying, quote, if art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him, end quote. So again, kind of subtweeting at this idea that, the arts should not be subservient to the whims of any politics, but specifically one man who happens to be in the White House at that time. Another person who's resigning because of this, musician Ben Folds. He was the artistic advisor of the National Symphony Orchestra, and he said, quote, given the developments at the Kennedy Center effective today, I'm resigning as artistic director to the NSO, the National Symphony Orchestra. Not for me. It's been a wonderful 8 years working with Kennedy Center President Deb Rutter, fellow artistic advisor Renee Fleming, NSO artistic administrator Justin Ellis, and the entire NSO staff, encouraging thousands of fresh new audiences to appreciate the symphonic music. Mostly, and above all, I'll miss the musicians of our nation's symphony orchestra. Just the best, end quote. So again, this isn't like people wanted to leave these positions. It's just that they understand that they are going to be in a climate that it's a lot like that. And I'm going to talk more about this later, but it's a lot like just what's going on in the federal government in general, where, a lot of people are just quitting their job, taking these buyouts that someone like Elon Musk is putting to them, just because they're like, I don't want to deal with, like, I don't want to be fighting political battles at my job that's theoretically not political. So this is why you're seeing this. Ben Folds mentioned Renee Fleming. She's an opera star. She's also departing from the Kennedy Center, saying, quote, out of respect, I think it's right to depart as well. I treasure the bipartisan support for this institution as a beacon of America at our best. I hope the Kennedy Center continues to flourish and serve the passionate and diverse audience in our nation's capital and across the country, end quote. So you're really seeing this brain drain. Again, similar like the government, the people that are leaving are the people that you need the most. Because if they're not leaving, not so much in this case, because it's just a board, but, like in the government, it's like the people who are leaving because they're good enough that they think they could get another job. And the people sticking around are the ones who don't feel like they can get another job. So all you're left with are the people who are not going to be good at this. Actor and writer Issa Rae, pictured here, she's not on the board by any stretch, but she had a sold-out show that was scheduled for next month at the center. She has since canceled the show, saying, quote, "Due to what I believe to be an infringement on the values of an institution that has faithfully celebrated artists of all backgrounds through all mediums, I decided to cancel my appearance at this venue," end quote. Luckily, if you have a ticket, you don't have to freak out. Tickets will be refunded. And similarly, the rock band Low Cut Connie, they had an upcoming performance that they have now canceled. And the band said, quote, "I was very excited to perform as part of this wonderful institution's social impact series, which emphasizes community, joy, justice, and equity through the arts. Upon learning that this institution that has run nonpartisan for 54 years is now chaired by President Trump himself and his regime, I decided I will not perform there," end quote. So, again, we're just missing out as a culture. These people don't want to be part of this. And you're basically, and part of me feels like, I don't think these people are smart enough to be doing this. These people, I mean like Trump and this whole kind of cohort. I don't think they're smart enough to be playing some kind of 3D chess match, but if they were, it seems like they're doing this to all these different government institutions, not because they actually have any intention of molding them to their whim. They want to destabilize them, and they want to make them seem irrelevant, because they stand in the way of certain objectives. So, something like the Kennedy Center theoretically, prevents them from achieving the cultural hegemony that they seek. And the reaction online, again, has been very negative. So I got a couple social media user quotes here from ButterbrowDC on Instagram saying, quote, "Trump doesn't care about the arts. He cares about power. The news is beyond upsetting," end quote. Similarly, Dr. Henry CT on X said, quote, "I enjoyed going to the Kennedy Center, but won't go again until Trump is dead and gone. I have other entertainment options, but resent that this bloated, bloviating, crass piece of shit inserts himself into every aspect of our lives. All he does is make people's lives miserable," end quote. So, Dr. Henry there, not holding back, not mincing words. But again, this idea that this is really, another battle in the culture war, right? And the culture war is defined by an attempt to manufacture outrage artificially, in order to shape cultural attitudes, right? Here's an example. Amongst the many things being canceled here, they have now canceled the tour of a children's musical called Finn, Finn. That was, I think it was like partially produced by the Kennedy Center. The Wrap describes the show as, quote, "Finn is a coming-of-age story about a shark with dreams of following in the family footsteps by joining the Shark Guard. The underwater musical explores themes of self-discovery and friendship and appeared at the Kennedy Center in November and December 2024. Now the national tour of the children's musical is off," end quote. Which is strange because it got pretty positive reviews. It was nominated for a Helen Hayes Award. But because it's about self-discovery and it could be interpreted as being kind of countercultural in a weird, backwards way, it's been axed. The creators of the musical said, quote, "While not a surprise given the events of last week, it is a heartbreak, but we will not be silenced, and we will not abandon the kids we wrote the show for. They are already under attack from every side," end quote. And I have another quote here from actor Kaylin D. Williams from the show saying, quote, While it can easily be classified as queer art, this show's overall message was to be true to yourself in the face of judgment, societal or family expectations, or ostracization. Always and unapologetically be who you are. That goes beyond the queer world. That is for everyone. And that is the message that is under attack," end quote. So yeah, it's not like an explicitly queer show. It's just about being true to yourself, and not giving in to societal pressures to be a certain thing or be a certain kind of person. Which, of course, doesn't fit in the cultural mold of we have a very specific idea of how every single person should be. And if you don't fit into that mold, you're causing problems. Actors Equity was not happy about this either, saying, quote, "We are outraged at the news that the Kennedy Center has canceled the upcoming tour of Finn, a musical for young audiences that just concluded an acclaimed run at the theater. Since its founding, the Kennedy Center has represented the full breadth of American culture. It is disturbing to see the new leadership of this institution move so swiftly to suppress viewpoints they do not agree with. And it is beyond appalling that the art that they find so dangerous is a joyful children's musical, encouraging young people to be true to themselves and follow their dreams," end quote. Of course, the Kennedy Center is denying this. A spokesperson told Deadline that it was canceled. This tour was canceled purely for financial reasons, which, again, if that's the case, that's really bad timing, and you need to hire a better PR person, because anyone would tell you that the people are going to associate the two. So clearly that's not the real reason. So all of this to say, look, at the end of the day, this is really not that big of a deal. The Kennedy Center has no, jurisdiction over people's lives in the way a government program does. But it's a dangerous stepping stone, right? Trump's entire political career over the last decade, but specifically this term, has been defined by pushing the envelope. It's Trump testing the water, see how far can I go, how much can I get away with. So this is a good first little test case, and seeing okay, I have installed myself through, not directly, but basically replacing the board through potential loopholes in the the statute for the Kennedy Center, installed a bunch of loyalists who then made me the chairman. Well, what's stopping him down the road from doing some kind of similar hostile takeover where Trump is directly in charge of some department, but doing so of a more important institution? And not to say the Kennedy Center is not important. I've devoted my whole life to the arts. But, what's going to happen? Could other institutions that are more important face a similar hostile takeover? I don't know. I'm not a political scientist, but it seems again why give a shit about this? If not A, to control the cultural narrative, and B, gradually get Americans used to the idea that this is what a president does, and this is what a president can do, and this is what a president will do. All right, before going on, I just want to give a quick plug to the podcast I do with my fiancée Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Middle-earth, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. It's a lot of fun. Those Peter Jackson movies are just so incredible. We just wrapped up watching that original trilogy. So definitely go check us out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 3. So Amazon has struck a deal to secure the exclusive streaming and theatrical rights for The Chosen, right? The show about Jesus, right? Prime Video will become the exclusive streaming home of the series. Prior to this, it was already on Amazon Prime Video, but it wasn't exclusive. It was on a couple other services. Amazon will now not only have these rights, but not only for the current seasons and the one that's about to start, but also for the next 2 and final seasons that have yet to be made, seasons 6 and 7. In addition to this, Amazon MGM Studios will distribute theatrical releases of the episodes. Up to now, Fathom Events had been distributing, you could go see the first episodes 1 and 2 of season 4 in theaters, and then a couple weeks later you could go see episodes 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6, right? And it looks like Amazon MGM will now be kind of taking that over. They've also struck a first look deal with 5 and 2 Studios, which is the production company behind The Chosen. So, if you don't know what a first look deal is, basically if 5 and 2 wants to do anything, any new project, they have to bring it to Amazon first to see if they want to do it, and then Amazon can pass, and then if they pass, then they can shop it to other people. But they get first dibs on anything. They also have ordered an unscripted series called The Chosen in the Wild with Bear Grylls, which will feature Bear Grylls doing stuff in the wild with the cast of The Chosen. I don't know what... That really does seem like AI came up with that. They put in all the things like, here are all the things that are popular that we want to, make a show for. Come up with an idea. And they spat this out. I got a quote here from Vernon Sanders, who's the head of television for Amazon MGM Studios, saying, quote, "The Chosen has had renowned success captivating audiences across generations, and we are looking forward to collaborating with Dallas Jenkins, who's the creator of the show, collaborating with Dallas and 5 and 2 Studios on a larger scale. As we look ahead, we see massive opportunities to develop additional faith-inspired content for our global Prime Video customers," end quote. So again, a little bit of background on The Chosen. So this is an American Christian television series that follows the life of Jesus Christ. Notably, it's the first multi-season television series to do so. We've had like mini-series in the past, but this is it's about to start its 5th season, and there's 2 more planned. So it is really the first of its kind. And here's the log lines. Quote, "Set against the backdrop of Roman oppression in the first century Israel, the series shares an authentic look at Jesus' revolutionary life and teachings. Season 5 of The Chosen is back for Holy Week, the most pivotal week in human history. Tables are turned, friends are betrayed, and powerful leaders plot the death of Jesus," end quote. This was created by Dallas Jenkins. He's the son of Jerry B. Jenkins, who you might not know by name. I didn't, but he is the author of the Left Behind media franchise, the book series. Left Behind is basically this like apocalyptic evangelical Christian media property, basically about post-rapture. So, if you know anything about Christianity, the rapture is this idea that has been misinterpreted by fundamentalist Christians, but I'm not going to open that can of worms. But this idea that basically before the apocalypse, all the good Christians will get assumed into heaven, and everyone else will be left on earth, and the Antichrist will rise up amongst the chaos. And this book kind of explores that, what if scenario. And again, it kind of frames this, it's evangelical, right? It's evangelical Christianity, so it definitely has more of a kind of anti-secular bent to it, in a way where it's like, you have people who were left behind, the titular left behind, who then realize they were wrong and they convert to Christianity, then battling the forces of evil of the Antichrist and, things like that. So, so Dallas Jenkins, the creator of the show, is definitely coming at it from a similar vantage point of evangelical Christianity, which I'm harping on because, that's very different, at least from my Christianity, because I was raised Roman Catholic. And I consider myself fairly devout, but also very, very, I call myself a Catholic leftist, which makes people's brains short circuit because you would think that they are incompatible. But in any case, this is where Dallas Jenkins, this is the, the angle that he's coming at it with. But it seems, I've never watched this show, but I've heard really good things from Catholics. So, it's not like this very specific type of Christianity that's on display here. And it seems like the appeal of the show really seems to be on making these biblical characters feel as three-dimensional as possible. And I have a quote here from Jenkins saying, quote, "It needs to feel authentic. It needs to feel human. Most Bible projects you've ever seen, including classics like the Ten Commandments, they don't feel like real human beings talking. They feel like statues or stained glass windows. So as long as these new voices really do adhere to that, I think you'll see a connective tissue in all these projects." I think they're talking about all the different kinds of projects that they are hoping to kind of use the success of this to springboard. The first season, it's kind of a success story. The first season was funded by crowdfunding. It was released just like online. And it became this phenomenon. So it ended up, again, becoming to these streaming services and now having this exclusive deal with Amazon Prime. It's available for free, but at different points in its history, it's had exclusive windows on certain services or in theaters. Again, this novel release approach through Fathom Events. And I've talked about it before on this channel. I've always felt that they should have more theatrical events for television programs, whether it be after the fact or leading up to its television debut or even live, right? Like imagine watching, one of the season finales of Game of Thrones in a packed theater. Like I feel like that would be really exciting. So it's really, so The Chosen has had this really unconventional distribution history. And again, it's been largely well received, and it definitely raises the bar in terms of what kind of quality we should expect from, faith-based projects. Because, this is a whole other topic, Again, I have another YouTube channel called Peter Squared where I do video essays. And one of the video essays I want to do eventually is talking about Christian films and the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And most Christian films are just essentially just they're affirmational. They basically just exist to make the Christians watching them feel good about themselves. And they don't really give you anything to sink your teeth into theologically or philosophically or morally or ethically. They really are just self-serving narratives. But it seems like, for better or for worse, that this isn't really like that. It seems like it's a lot more interested in trying to bring the humanity to Jesus, right? But that doesn't mean, even if a leftist like myself could enjoy this, and again, I'm saving this to watch. This is one of those white whales. I'm like, I'll get to this, right? But even if it could be enjoyable for a leftist like myself, there's no arguing that, you're gonna so if you were to poll people who watch this show and really love the show, they're gonna be more conservative. They're gonna be more evangelical Christians. And as we've been talking all week now, in all the stories this week. Because this is story number 3. Stories 1 and 2 were similar in that there's more money to be made now in conservative media and conservative stories, right? Again, I would argue Christianity isn't inherently conservative or isn't even really truly conservative at all. But nevertheless, Christianity, at least in the United States, has a conservative social connotation. And again, I don't think a deal like The Chosen was already successful over the past couple of years. It was a very, very popular show. But I don't think Amazon would pull the trigger on this deal had Trump not been reelected to office. Again, companies are looking at that, rightly or wrongly, and concluding, people are done with woke. People are more conservative now when it comes to social issues. So Amazon thinks in this current political climate, a show like this could make them a lot of money. So you're going to see more religious content. Again, like I mentioned before, the team behind The Chosen have talked about doing other projects, like a series about Jesus' youth, or doing series about other biblical stories, like from the Old Testament. And looking at it just in a vacuum, again, it's exciting to see more recognition for a show like this. Because again, as a budding filmmaker myself, I have plans perhaps one day for my own Jesus project, if you will. I think every Christian Catholic filmmaker has that idea in their head. So this is exciting. That's something like this is getting that kind of play. But I'm always interested to see takes on Jesus that emphasize his humanity because sometimes though, like if you look at something like The Last Temptation of Christ, which I don't really care for, but not because I find it blasphemous. I just don't really like the filmmaking all that much. If anything, my favorite parts were where it really deviated from, at least at a film level, a cinematic level, I liked it the best when it was deviating from the Bible and dogmatic, traditional theology. But oftentimes it feels like you only have two options. You either make him a stoic, kind of like what Dallas Jenkins said in that quote. You either make him like the stoic, almost like alien who just talks in these and thous and knows everything, whatever. Or you make him really human, but in order to make him human, you just make him like sinful. You just make him lustful or angry. Like you not to, again, open this can of worms of Catholic theology, but the idea is that Jesus was both fully man and fully God. Not 50% human, 50% God. He was fully both. So he was still fully man in that he felt these temptations, but he was still God, so he did not act on these. So I feel like any way that we can depict Jesus in a human way that isn't just taking the easy way out of, we'll make him human by making him horny. Like, I feel like that's just, forget like the blasphemous part, which isn't necessarily blasphemous for me or offensive to me. I just find it lazy. I just don't find it interesting characterization. Because any character being horny is not interesting. It's just because, Jesus is not supposed to be horny. So, this is exciting nevertheless to see. Though, again, it does trouble me the larger implications of why a company like Amazon thinks it would be in their financial interest to back a show like this. Okay, let me grab another drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So, if you are a lady, I have good news for you. The percentage of the 100 top grossing films from last year with female protagonists has finally matched those with male protagonists. Whoopee! This is from a report from Dr. Martha Lausen as part of her annual It's a Man's Celluloid World, so celluloid's in parentheses, her annual It's a Man's Celluloid World report. And her findings were that 42% of the top 100 grossing movies from last year were led by women. They had female protagonists. Another 42% were led by male protagonists, and then the remaining 16% were ensemble films, so like they kind of don't count. And this is a big improvement over last year's results. So last year, women fell behind, and the percentage of these top 100 films led by female protagonists was at 28%, despite Barbie being the number one movie of the year, both domestically and worldwide. In 2021, weren't that much better. In 2021, 2022, these percentages were at 31 and 32% respectively. So this is a big jump from 32% in 2022 to now 42%. And this is the best numbers since 2019, which was at 40%. And I think this is the best that it's ever been since Lausen has been doing this analysis since I think it was like 2002. Women also saw small gains in other categories, not as big of jumps, but still gains. The percent of female characters in speaking roles rose from 35 to 37%, and then the percent of major female characters at all rose from 38 to 39%. So you do have these little gains. And Lausen kind of went into more detail here, saying, quote, 2024 offered one of the richest slates of films featuring female protagonists in recent memory. These fictional women railed against unsatisfying personal relationships and discriminatory work environments. Films such as The Substance push back hard against a culture that considers women disposable. While the number of films with female protagonists rose to a historic high in 2024 after a dismally lean 2023, the percentage of women in the more stable categories of major and speaking roles reflected only minor gains, end quote. And of course, these results were impacted by films like Inside Out 2, Wicked, Moana 2, It Ends With Us, and the aforementioned The Substance, right? And the reason why this is interesting to me, or why this is important, I should say, is, people think, we need to have more underrepresented groups in films and in TV shows or video games or just in media, because it's important for children of those underrepresented groups to see themselves represented. And that is really important. But I think the bigger issue that in a lot of ways affects the other, so by focusing on this other thing that I'm about to say, you actually fix that original thing. It's more of a labor issue, right? Because we forget creatives are workers. This is a job. Even if they love it and they are being creative and getting to express themselves, it's still a job. And actresses are workers. And when there are less films with less roles, that means there are less jobs for female actors. And not only are there less jobs, there are less higher paying jobs. And again, this applies to all marginalized communities. Again, whether it be the queer community or the black community or any other, people of color, just any group that has been traditionally and historically shut out of the system. Yes, it's important to see women in film for the emotional reasons or the social reasons, but I think most important is this labor issue of just giving women more opportunities to be in films. And again, not only be in films, but be in these higher grossing, bigger projects. So this is really reassuring. I actually did one of my earlier videos on this channel was about those results from 2023 and how they were really sad and pathetic. So this is I'm happy to see this, right? Progress has been made. But it's like that song from the Hairspray credits. Come so far, got so far to go, right? We still have a long way to go. And I think the solution is to just enable more female filmmakers and storytellers, right? That, you're going to have more films centering women or centering the black community or centering queer people when the writers and directors and producers of these films are women, are black, are queer. And so that would be if there's anything actionable from this, I think, they really should be, trying to set these communities up for success. So again, this is exciting to see. It at least matched it. Because you might just see 42% and go, oh, it's still, not equal. But men had the same. So again, come so far, but we still have We've got so far to go. Okay, that was a quick one. Let me grab a quick drink here. All right, let's talk about story number 5. The Justin Baldoni, Blake Lively feud has continued. And before I go any further, I had someone comment, and I'm not calling you out because it's funny. Someone commented basically saying, it's Baldoni, like pepperoni. It rhymes with pepperoni. You keep saying Baldoni. And to that person, I say, thank you very much. I'm from Rhode Island. I'm Italian. I'm going to say Justin Baldoni. Justin Baldoni. That's how we would talk. So I'm going to keep calling him Baldoni. I'm sorry if it really bothers you. Sorry. So Blake Lively's legal team has issued subpoenas to crisis PR firm consultant Jed Wallace, along with several telecom companies, to prove whether or not Justin Baldoni has the quote-unquote receipts, right? That's something he's claimed. He's like, oh, her claims are false. They're provably false. I have all the texts. I have all the receipts. We're going to prove that Lively was wrong. So Lively's now saying, okay, well, we're going to now get those receipts. Lively's lawyers put out a statement saying, quote, Miss Lively has initiated discovery that will expose the people, tactics, and methods that have worked to destroy and bury her reputation and family over the past year. Subpoenas went out to the entities above. We will now receive all of the receipts that, unsurprisingly, are nowhere to be found on Mr. Brian Freeman's website. Brian Freeman is Baldoni's lawyer, and the website they're referring to, they created a website called thelawsuitinfo.com. You can go look it up, basically outlining their argument against Lively. Continuing with the quote, we will now receive all of the receipts that unsurprisingly are nowhere to be found on Mr. Brian Freeman's website, and like Miss Lively, those receipts will have their day in court, end quote. Of course, Brian Freeman responded back. He clapped back, as the kids say. He clapped back, saying, quote, subpoenas are an ordinary part of the litigation process. What is extraordinary is what the Lively parties are seeking. They are asking for every single call, text, data log, and even real-time location information for the past 2.5 years, regardless of the sender, recipient, or subject matter. This massive fishing expedition demonstrates that they are desperately seeking any factual basis for their provably false claims. They will find none, end quote. So again, this is just the next and newest battle in this feud between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. I'm not going to go into every single detail. The short TLDR, she has accused him of sexual harassment and a coordinated smear campaign against her. He, in turn, has accused her of defamation. There's a couple other parties involved being sued, other accusations being made, but that's kind of the broad gist of it. And, if you're I don't want to say a fan, if you're a student of history and you're a student of World War II, and a lot of wars are like this. There's different, what we call theaters. Basically just means like different locations or elements of the war. So, like in World War II, there was the European theater and then there was the Pacific theater, right? This is similar, that it has two very distinct theaters of war. There's the legal theater of war and the public theater. The public has been seeing a lot of action. It's a lot of the stories I've been doing on the channel have been public comments, public accusations back and forth. This is one of the few, we haven't really had a legal development in a little bit. And so this is kind of a new development here. So the details of the subpoenas, they're subpoenaing, would that be the subpoenaing, right? AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, saying, quote, phone records belonging to all the individual defendants will expose the full web of individuals who were involved in the smear campaign against Miss Lively. Such records will provide critical and irrefutable evidence not only about who, but also about when, where, and how their retaliation plan came together and operated, end quote. They're also issuing subpoenas to Cloudflare Incorporated and AOL, saying, quote, internet records will show the involvement of different persons who might be playing key roles in digital retaliation, end quote. Regarding Jed Wallace, right, that PR consultant who's also getting subpoenaed, a Lively spokesperson said, quote, in their internal private messages that Baldoni's team never expected anyone to see, they bragged that thanks to Jed's work, they saw a shift in the narrative to putting a spotlight on Blake and laughed at how sad it was that people so easily want to hate on a woman. We look forward to investigating more about Jed Wallace's entire business model and what else he was doing to distract from the very real sexual harassment and retaliation claims made by Miss Lively. We are delighted to be able to start discovery on it, end quote. I didn't pull the quote here, but Jed Wallace responded basically being like, I don't know what I'm being sued for because I never entered into any contract with Blake Lively, so I didn't commit any crimes. I I didn't breach the contract. I didn't retaliate against her for bringing up civil rights issues. So he's kind of like, I don't know why I'm being roped up into this. Like, I mean, we know why, because he's part of the campaign, but it doesn't seem like there's really any grounds to be suing him. But I guess the idea is that they're just issuing him a subpoena so they can get the info on Baldoni. And again, like I said, this is the first real legal development we've had in some time, so this move is welcome, right? I'm tired of this PR, he said, she said. This PR BS. Public relations bullshit, if you wanted to know what that meant. At this point, I'm like, let's put some actual evidence on the table. A leaked voice memo is not evidence. The video of the takes on set demonstrating, whether or not Baldoni was crossing a boundary, that's not evidence. I want actual hard evidence. Though perhaps the strategy is overblown. Again, I'm not, I don't know all the facts. I don't know all the details. More is going to keep coming out about this. But, I got a quote here from one of Baldoni's lawyers, Mitchell Schuster. He called the request, quote, wildly disproportionate to the needs of the case and unnecessarily invades the privacy of untold numbers of third parties, including family, friends, business partners, and quite literally any other person with whom any of the targets have communicated with over a period of years, end quote. So his argument is basically, it's a little invasive. You kind of, instead of trying to find the needle in the haystack, you're just asking for the whole haystack. And there might be stuff there that, they don't want people to see, not because of anything illicit, just because it's private messaging. Or they're arguing this because they know they don't have the receipts and they don't want them to be found out, right? So it's all relative, it's all subjective. We really don't know until we, again, see more of this info. And again, there's still a lot of time. We still have more than a year into the actual trial, which isn't scheduled until March 2026, like the very end of March as well. Though the judge has threatened to move the case up if both sides keep trading public jabs at each other. But I would imagine that both will become a little more disciplined. At least the side, if they truly feel like they're right, they will shut up. If they don't think they're right, they will, again, I truly believe both sides think they're right. And both sides probably are right. I didn't cite this as a source, but I don't know how a reporter ran an op-ed that, again, information might come out later that might make what I'm about to say seem really dumb in hindsight and siding with kind of trying to both sidesism the situation. But the op-ed was basically, the theme of the op-ed was basically, look, it seems like both of them kind of did stuff that they shouldn't have, and that I really wouldn't want to work with either of them. But, ultimately there will be more chess moves in this game. This is not over, as I keep saying, and I keep getting proven right. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give one quick final plug to Cinema Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as a Substack newsletter where I publish written reviews for new movies coming out. We have a new column up on Cinema Q called Jacob's Gaze, written by a good friend of mine, Jacob Boblet. Kind of doing his own reviews and musings on the film and entertainment industry. Definitely go check that out. It would really mean a lot to me. You can find the link in the description down below. You can also just find us if you type in go to your browser, type in cinemacuso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this live stream. It really, really, really helps with engagement, the algorithm, and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, if you've stumbled upon this, why not subscribe? We're growing. We just crossed 300 subscribers the other day. That makes me really happy. Thank you to everyone who's been along for the ride. We've been doing this for over a year now, a little over a year now. It's been a lot of fun. I really want to keep trying to grow this so that maybe one day I can make some money off of this so I can quit my job, my full-time job. So once again, thank you all so much. Until next time, peace out.